Title: My family made me eat their leftovers for 8 years. So, I started serving them food from the garbage at Thanksgiving dinner. Start: I didn't plan to poison them. That would have been too easy, too loud. No, my revenge needed to be quiet, precise. The kind of punishment whispered about long after the plates were cleared. And as I watched my family chew that first bite of Thanksgiving dinner, I knew the moment had arrived. Their eyes softened, their shoulders relaxed. They had no idea what they were eating. Not yet. I grew up believing sacrifice was love. At our house, meals were distributed. Dad got the fresh plate. Mom got whatever she wanted off the stove. My siblings picked through the rest. And me? I got whatever was left after everyone decided they weren't hungry anymore. Cold bites, crusted edges, the scraped, forgotten pieces. For 8 years, they called it making me humble. They laughed when I tried to hide how hungry I was. Gratitude builds character, Mom used to say, pushing a half-eaten plate toward me like she was offering gold. I swallowed their scraps, but the resentment, the slow, simmering heat was what nourished me. Funny how hunger teaches you more about people than anything else. The turning point came the night I found the note. It was tucked under the salt shaker, Mom's handwriting, sharp as her voice. Don't let him touch the real food. He wastes it. Wastes it. As if I were some stray animal wandering through their kitchen. I stood there, reading that note over and over, the fridge humming behind me like a warning. I didn't cry, not anymore. Instead, I began noticing things. How they'd throw away untouched vegetables because they went out to eat. How they tossed entire casseroles when guests canceled. How trash bags bulged with luxury, food they wouldn't let me have. That was the night the hunger changed. It sharpened, focused, turned intelligent. Revenge doesn't happen in a burst of anger. It happens in steps, quiet ones. I started small, observing, figuring out what they liked, what they hated, what they were allergic to. Preparing, carefully, recipes that looked expensive but were cheap to recreate with scraps. I learned how to freeze old food so it still looked fresh, how to disguise odors with spices. A year of practice, a year of perfecting the art of taking trash and turning it into cuisine. By Thanksgiving, I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. I offered so generously to cook the whole meal myself. They laughed. "Don't mess it up," Dad said, patting my shoulder like he was selecting a dog in a shelter. I smiled back. I had already prepared everything. The turkey? Thrown out by a neighbor 2 days earlier. A little burnt, a little dry, but nothing a butter glaze couldn't fix. The stuffing? Leftovers from 3 restaurants, chopped together and softened with broth. They loved stuffing. I knew they'd take seconds. Mashed potatoes? Collected from discarded takeout containers. Whipped until no one would notice they weren't ours. The only thing fresh in that kitchen was my patience. When they sat down, they didn't wait for me. Of course they didn't. They never had. The first bites were the hardest. Not for them, for me. My heart was steady, but my hands shook slightly as I poured the wine. Mom closed her eyes. This is good. Dad reached for more gravy. About time you learned to cook properly. My siblings were already on their second plate. They didn't taste it. Not the bitterness, not the history baked inside each spoonful. They tasted safety, because they believed I would serve them what they thought I deserved. I waited until their plates were nearly empty before I spoke. "You like it?" My voice was calm, casual. Mom smiled. Surprisingly, yes. "It should be," I said. "I got all of it from the trash." The silence cracked like ice under a boot. Dad froze mid-chew. Mom's fork slipped. My brother gagged. My sister stared at her plate like it might crawl off the table. I let the moment breathe. Let the truth sink deep into their stomachs. You threw away better food than you ever let me eat, I continued. So today, I thought you should taste what you fed me. Mom's face twisted. You're lying. I pulled out pictures, time-stamped, clear. Me collecting the turkey from the neighbor's bin, the mashed potatoes scraped out of containers, the stuffing pieced together like a puzzle from discarded meals. Their eyes widened, a mixture of disgust, betrayal, and finally, fear. Dad stood up. How could you do this to your family? I looked at him, steady. You stopped being my family the day you decided I wasn't worth a real meal. He had no answer for that. The fallout was quiet. They stormed out, of course, indignant, humiliated. But humiliation has a long aftertaste. They didn't call me for weeks. When they finally did, their voices were softer, careful, like they were speaking to something dangerous. And maybe they were, because I had learned something vital that Thanksgiving. Power tastes better when you've starved for it. I still cook now, not for them, never again. For myself, fresh meals, hot plates, food that doesn't come from anyone's leftovers. Sometimes I think about that night, the shock in their eyes, the realization that the hungry child they ignored learned how to feed himself, and how to make them swallow the truth. I don't regret any of it, not one bite. Hunger builds character, but revenge? Revenge builds freedom.